Call to order the Avon Town Council meeting for September 22nd, 2022. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Julie, would you mind taking roll call, please?
Steve Eisenbarth.
Present.
Aaron Teveball. Robert Pope.
Present.
Don Loudon.
Present.
Greg Zuzen.
Present.
We have a quorum. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda to include the check register, minutes from our executive session and work session, regular meeting minutes as well, pardon me. Any conversation, discussion, or entertain a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a first and a second. Julie, roll call vote, please.
Don Loudon.
4.
Robert Pope.
4.
Steve Eisenbarth.
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Next item on the agenda is the first of 2 public comment opportunities. You may comment on items on the agenda that are not a public hearing or on a specific matter within the council's jurisdiction. This is not a Q&A session, but an opportunity to share your comments with the council. Please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and limit your time to 3 minutes. Seeing no rush to the mic, we'll close that section of public comment, move on to council comment and liaison reports. Ms. Loudon.
A federal grant in the amount of $5,565, and so we're proud of their effort to seek those grants, which helps us fiscally, as everybody knows. But specifically, that $5,565 will pay for 50% of match for 11 officers to replace their ballistic vest. Greg and I and Ryan also attended a neighborhood annexation open house meeting the other night. It was well attended. All but one homeowner showed up during that, so that was a positive meeting. And then also attended the township board meeting the other night.
Mr. Zuzen.
Dawn covered it. I have nothing.
Mr. Eisenbarth.
Yeah, I got pressure to go short this time, I guess. I will defer to Mr. Moore when it comes to DPW because I think he has a great announcement about one of our roadways. So I'll put mystery out there.
Excellent. Had the council summit put on by AIM last week. I don't believe anything new was really shared, but the refresher was worth it to stay on top of things like that around the state. Topics covered were ethics as elected officials, conflicts of interest, et cetera, as well as budgeting strategies, legal requirements, as well as a discussion of TIF strategies and available use. Chamber board meeting last Friday, the board discussed at length the amount of effort and lack of funds from the Rib Fest event. This year's event should bring the chamber roughly $9 grand, and they had approximately 7,000 attendees. It was the largest single day event for the county. And then, as Dawn mentioned, we attended the township board meeting this Tuesday. They discussed their 2023 budget, their plans for purchasing a vehicle for public transportation, and the date for the public hearing regarding their petition for government reorganization, which is 25 October at 6:30. And just on a note, I didn't know this, but bulletproof vests sort of expire.
Yes.
That's why we need new. I didn't know, honestly didn't know. I warned them and I didn't know that. Next item on the agenda, moving on. Next item on the agenda, new business, public hearing for the 2023 budget and budget discussion. Open up the public hearing first. All right. At 7:06, we'll open the public hearing for the 2023 budget discussion. Again, seeing no rush to the mic, we'll close the public hearing. Do we need to have discussion on it? I think maybe this is a Dan question.
You may. You're not required to. You may.
Okay. Any questions, discussion?
I'll just make comment that I appreciate the staff, the way they've been working with this on a regular basis to kind of carve away and work with it. And I like the idea of having it on the forms that we have for the state forms. It's kind of makes it easy for everyone to see it, and it's great for uploading to the state system coming up. So other than that, all I can say is that I'm very appreciative of the way it's gone through this process this year.
All right, no further discussion. Moving on. Next item on the agenda, Resolution 2022-19 levy appeal. Ryan, are you speaking to this, or is Dan?
No, I'll speak to it. I think Greg brought this up during his presentation. Every year, one of the things Financial Solutions Group analyzes whether we have the opportunity to do a levy appeal. And so because of some annexations that we actually did last fiscal year, they are recommending that we do a levy appeal. And so in order for us to move forward with that as staff, we need you guys to pass a resolution saying you in fact want to do that. So happy to answer any questions.
So if we appeal this, we're appealing $35,000 or?
That's correct. Yeah. So it'd allow us to grow a levy by $35,000.
It doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, tell me what I'm missing.
No, you're not missing a lot. So it's because of annexation. So if you remember when we passed the fiscal plans, it's basically the additional cost for us to provide services to those areas that we annex. And so state law says we can actually appeal that to allow us to grow our levy for that, because that's not accounted in the 5% growth. And so they'll give you additional reasons. And so if you recall, the annexation that this was the Southwest Township piece, which again, it was a reasonable sized annexation in terms of area, but it wasn't necessarily in terms of assessed value and cost to provide services. We were already providing services in that area. So that's why it's relatively small. If it was a really big annexation, it'd be a bigger number.
And I think what Greg Garitos would say if he were here is that it is important to capture this growth above what the state normally would allow, 5%, because if you don't capture it now, you can never go back and get it. So this 35,000, you'll get it forever. You'll get it forever. It'll pay for itself in the long run. It'll become $350,000 or $700,000 someday. And so if you don't go grab this, you used to be able to what we call bank the excess levy, and that is you could wait 4 or 5 years until the number got bigger, but then they let you go back all these years and capture the 35 in year one and the 60 in year two. They don't let you do that anymore. So now you have to go in every year and get what you can. And so that's what Greg would say, is that this is a real long-term play. It's important more for long-term levy growth, and over time, it'll really make it worth its while.
And based on what you just said, we have prior councils that didn't do that, and we lost out on a lot of levy.
We did. There during times of rapid growth and annexation, there were times in the past we filed these, but yeah, we weren't required under the law at that time to be so diligent about looking at it every year. This is a good recommendation by Greg, in my opinion, and you should be prepared to do it every year.
So we have to wait until that taxation period comes. So we're like a 1 year behind. Is that?
Right. Yeah. Because we're always in the rear. So that's what we actually, the year after is
Okay.
we do the annexations is actually then when we would do the appeal, which would then go into effect next year.
Okay.
Any further discussion? If not, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept and approve resolution number 2022-19, the resolution and petition to appeal for an increase of the maximum levy.
No, second that. That's
We
good.
have a first and a second. Julie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
Or
Don Loudon.
4.
Next item on the agenda, Resolution 2022-20, declaratory resolution for ERA Chicago Industrial.
Yeah, I told John I would do this for him. We did get an application from Chicago Industrial. As you guys are aware, they've started working on what I'll refer to as Lot 1, Building 2 in the Avon Logistics Center. And so this tax abatement that they're applying for is for that building. It's the 1,009,000 square foot building. And they are asking for a tax abatement. This is the first step in the process. So you guys have to declare it an economic revitalization area. And then we will notice it for a public hearing, and then it'll show up on a future It'll actually would be your second meeting in October, assuming you guys do pass it tonight. Then you do a confirmatory resolution, and that's just the process for a tax abatement. Happy to answer any questions.
My only questions are, we have a dated form that we're using. On page 1 of the application for tax incentives, it's dated July 6th of 2017. Is that the date it was approved, or shouldn't it be the date that they're applying for? And secondly, it's to the attention of a former employee that does not even work here anymore. So if we could change that.
That was going to be my comment.
I would say, are you actually on the application?
Application for tax incentives.
Yeah, John must have just given him the wrong application. We've got a different one. We can get it cleaned up.
Thank
You'll notice
you.
it's not signed as yet either, and they're working on getting that. So before it gets to you at confirmatory resolution, we'll make sure that's all cleaned up.
Well, that was my last one too. It's not signed.
Right.
So,
Any further questions, discussion?
No.
Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion, resolution 2022-20, right? That's the one?
Yep.
That we accept as presented.
We have a first.
second.
We have a first and a second. Julie, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Next item on the agenda, Resolution 2022-21, approving expansion of area and allocation areas. Again, I assume you're speaking of this one. right?
I will. Yep. I'm really tired of talking about this. This actually is finally the last step. This is to create an expansion to the Avon EDA, expanding it basically to include the Easton Gray project, and then creating 5 allocation areas for the Easton Gray development to eventually capture TIF revenue. It has been through the entire process. It went to the redevelopment commission on Monday night, and they did pass the confirmatory resolution. And so ultimately, that final decision is with the town council, but it's made its way through here and been approved by everybody. And so this is the final step. Once the council approves it, we have to go then record it and send it to the DLGF, and then it basically becomes so. So I know you guys have heard this a lot, so I won't speak any more to it unless you have questions.
Any questions for staff? If not, entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve resolution 2022-21 as presented.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Julie, roll call vote, please.
Don Loudon,
4.
Robert Pope,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Steve Eisenbarth,
Next item on the agenda, final reading ordinance 2022-22, approving election redistricting plan. Dan, I assume you're speaking of this one?
Yes, this ordinance approves the redistricting plan for the town, establishing new boundaries for your 3 wards and making conforming changes to your town code. This is second reading, so you may act on it tonight.
You've updated the changes I saw that I had from the last one. And again, I just want to give kudos. Daniel did a great job. That's great work.
I mean, we're less than 2% difference.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Pretty impressive.
Well, I think everybody knows, even though we have 3 districts, the whole town votes for those people in those 3 districts as well as the at-large.
It's good to show the fairness. I think, that it balances the people so they're represented well. So that's good.
And if no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance 2022-22, approving the election redistricting plan.
We have a first
I'll second.
and a second. Julie, would you take roll call vote, please?
Steve Eisenbarth,
4.
Don Loudon,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Robert Pope,
4. Next item on the agenda, introduction of ordinance 2022-23, vehicle take-home policy.
Yes, this ordinance, which is introduction or first reading tonight only, makes minor changes to your take-home policy, specifically reciting the fact that your police department has its own take-home policy now in order to manage the risk to the town. And on the administrative side, just minor changes were made to clarify the take-home right as a privilege that certain employees will have if the town manager determines that it's obviously beneficial for their response time or the execution of their performance to have that take-home vehicle. So it tightens up then some of the rules and changes some of the wording in the policy. This would make changes to both your code and your employee handbook, and it's first reading. Be happy to answer any questions.
My only comment is, I'm fine with this, is the 15-mile radius. I mean, you think that would be an issue?
I don't, I checked with the employees that were taken home. They're all within that 15-mile radius, but I feel like that's important to the policy. The point of the policy is that they can quickly respond. So doing a wider, broad swath than that kind of defeats the purpose. So I feel like 15 miles is very reasonable. And if they're not within that distance, then
Didn't want to make certain we were
Right.
putting them in jeopardy because they were further away and they couldn't respond as quickly. More as was it a negative versus a positive?
And then kind of like what I was mentioning earlier, last time we were talking about this, is that I do believe systems such as the Garmin type system where you have the camera and having that, it helps the town employees so then they don't get charged with something. I see it all the time in construction. Someone drives with an emblem on the side of their truck and they become a target for someone to hit or try to get money out of. And if you have a camera system always activated on there, they're not that expensive. And it's run just when the vehicle's on. They even have ones that have sensors so that if you touch the vehicle, it even tells how many times people have done that. So very inexpensive way to kind of protect our liability, but I think it's great. I'm all for this, but I just think those type things are not to use them as micromanagers. We got to be careful there, but to use it as a protection for the employee.
I know it's the case. I just want to make sure and ask it. You have the flexibility to institute or pull that away from someone who might be misusing it or might not meeting those standards. Thank you. If no further comments or discussion, we'll notice ordinance 2022-23 as introduced. Next item, introduction of ordinance 2022-24, record retention policy.
Yes, the purpose of this ordinance is to place in your town code the state document retention rules. And of course, these rules apply to us whether they're in your town code or not. But what we found recently was we really needed to know this information. Some of your department heads need to know something about specific types of documents. So we've recommended that they be placed in your code so both the public and the town staff and you all can quickly find out what the retention period. These retention periods are established by the State Board of Accounts, and they are, as you can see, very specific to the type of document. So this would insert this schedule into your town code so everyone can see it. This is first reading only.
Any questions, discussion?
Nope.
All right. Show that ordinance 2022-24 as introduced. Next item, introduction of ordinance 2022-25, donation threshold increase.
Yes, this ordinance would amend section 2301 of your town code. This has to do with donations that are made to the town. There is a separate process for vetting those, but back in 2004, there was a small gift provision designed to deal with smaller donations. What this ordinance would do, based upon feedback that we have from the staff and natural changes that occur to these ordinance over time, is that we're proposing that amount be raised because obviously time has passed and $500, we do receive some donations pretty regularly that are above $500 and yet under $2,500. And so anything that's above this small amount has to come to you for approval. And so this is just designed to recognize the fact that we do have a number of small gifts, which could be approved administratively by the town manager rather than having to run the full gambit. And so that's what this ordinance change is about. And this is also first reading.
Any questions? Any, or
This is
discussion?
just cash, right? Not in kind or anything like that.
It doesn't matter. It could be in kind or it could be cash. It's just the amount that's changed and just the amount.
For businesses that donate for employee appreciation week, things like that? or-
Yes. For
People
all,
just walk in the door and give us money.
yeah, or, well, some of your events, you have,
National Night Out.
yeah, you have businesses donate $1,000. Well, under the existing policy, that is something that has to be come back to you guys. It takes time. Sometimes that doesn't work well, but if the town manager under the policy, if the town manager has any concerns that the donation shouldn't be approved administratively, he can always kick it up to you. But we just find there are a lot of donations between that 5 and 2,500. And in terms of talking to Brian about that, whether it be your fireworks or your National Night Out or your park events, it would make things a lot easier if that amount were a little higher. And I'm confident your town manager can still administer. And if there's a question about a donation, can still run it to you guys for your approval. But if it's someone who donates every year that we have longstanding relationships with, then administratively approving those might be the more efficient way to handle it.
That was the word I was looking for, efficient, yeah. Any questions or further discussion?
Just only if it's ethical, I guess. That's the only thing, are other communities of this level? I mean, is that, or do we have precedent of some other communities maybe that are doing that?
Most communities don't have a donation policy. I think you guys got ahead of this a long time ago in trying to make sure that you didn't inadvertently accept donations from developers who had projects pending before you,
Yeah.
or controversial political groups who might try to align yourself with them when you might not just check it. But I think what you would find, most communities don't have a donation policy. They just accept whatever they want.
Well, then I want a policy.
Yeah, well, you already have a policy. This is just one part of it, so.
No other.
All right, let's let the record show ordinance 2022-25 as introduced. Next item, introduction of ordinance 2022-26, amending salary provisions.
Yes, this ordinance would amend section 2235 of your town code. You have a unique part of your town code where you restate everything in your salary ordinance for every position in the town. I've always thought that's a little unusual because most of the time your town code just says, we will establish our salaries by our salary ordinance, and it just incorporates your salary ordinance rather than listing each position. And the reason that we don't often see this is because then this means that every year all of these sections have to be changed. And it seems kind of silly that we would have that. So what this ordinance does what we would recommend, which is to eliminate the position by position listing and simply say that your salary ordinance would be incorporated would be included by incorporation, which you can see in subparagraph A. And then that way that section won't have to be amended every year and every year. For purposes of transparency, your salary ordinance is an ordinance. It has to be introduced and adopted. And then also all salaries are published in January anyway. And there's no issue of transparency. This is just the kind of information that I think should not have ever been in your town code. It's very, very cumbersome way to deal with it. And so we recommended to Ryan that we get that out and get that modernized, I'll say. And this is just introduction also.
So we're not taking the information away. We're just putting it in its most efficient, most easily editable, annually editable area where it should be in the salary ordinance alone. We're not duplicating every year.
Yeah, it's already public in 2 different places. Once in the fall, once in January. Anybody could see what it is position by position and see your budget line item by line item. And so, but it was a practice long ago when towns were really small. They might only be listing like 5 salaries. Obviously, as the town government grows, it just really gets to be kind of an inconvenient way. So it's much better just to say, see our salary ordinance, and attach that as an index to the code itself.
Any further question, comments? All right, let the record show ordinance 2022-26 as introduced. Next item, introduction of ordinance 2022-27, parking prohibition on Charles Nelson Drive. Ryan? Oh, Dan? All right.
Yeah, this ordinance would make a change to section 869, which are your parking prohibitions on public roads. And the purpose of this ordinance is really to add a no parking area as you can see in number 8, both sides of Charles Nelson Drive would be no parking. And that's the only change this makes. As you can see, you'll see the other 7 areas which are no parking. You don't have a lot of no parking areas in the town, but this is part of the way that area was developed and needed. So that would just add as a no parking area, both sides of Charles Nelson Drive. And this is introduction
I
only.
have is Charles Nelson Drive. Does that come from 900 and go all the way west past the Satori Point roundabout to the dead end to those apartments? Or is it just from Satori Point to the east to 900?
It's just Satori Point to the east. So the piece that's to the west is not a public street, so we wouldn't regulate the parking on that
Okay.
street.
Okay, thank you.
I do see where it's specific that it's.
Microphone.
I do see where it's specifically stated that it will become effective as soon as the no parking signs are installed, not as when we were to pass the ordinance.
Maybe you might be able to answer, Ryan. How long is it going to take before, if we pass this, well, we can't pass it tonight. The next meeting, we pass this, adopt this ordinance. What's install time for those signs?
Couple of weeks, not very long.
We have a new digger.
I think we have enough in stock, we're gonna do it pretty quick.
Okay. Any further questions or comments?
Nope.
Let the record show ordinance 2022-27 as introduced. Next item on the agenda, public hearing and introduction of ordinance 2022-28, the MHG annexation. Public hearing first, or speak to it? Give us the information. I'm sorry, Dan's trying to tell me.
Why don't we allow Brian to introduce it and then ask for public?
Roger that. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a proposed annexation on County Road 900 East. I think you guys are familiar with it. You've had an introduction of a rezoning for this same property, and the town council did accept the annexation petition. So kudos to Ian for getting this into the process and move in. So it is for that property for a proposed hotel location, basically across from the Costco. And so this is basically the first step in the process, the public hearing. So we have to open up the public hearing, and then you guys will have a couple other steps, accepting resolution and final adoption later.
All right, we will open up the public hearing at 7:30 PM. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please come forward to the mic, state your name, address, and limit your time to 3 minutes. Seeing no rush to the mic, we will close the public hearing and open it up for questions for staff, comments. We have this on the Planning Commission agenda Monday as for the actual rezoning for the zoning amendment. That's completely irrelevant to the annexation, correct?
Correct, yeah. And again, we do have to get into this process to give us that zoning jurisdiction, but in the end, we hope to have that, the annexation adoption and the rezoning actually align themselves. So they're kind of moving on parallel paths.
Let me ask you a question. This annexation is being asked of us by the property owners, correct? Not from the purchase agreement of the property.
The petition was actually signed by MHG, who is the developer. It was not signed by the property owners.
What happens if they decide not to buy that property?
Then they would withdraw their annexation request.
What happens if we've already approved it and it's become of record?
Well, they've asked us to run that parallel process so that you will actually hear the rezoning first, and they will If the rezoning is denied, they may ask you to withdraw the annexation.
I just want to make certain we don't get ourselves caught between a rock and a hard place, because I've heard discussions that may or may not happen.
Sure. Yeah, and that's what ultimately we'll make sure that on your agenda, you guys will have the rezoning first and the annexation will be lower on the agenda. And so the developer would have the opportunity to withdraw that then if the outcome doesn't work in their favor. Which is a typical process.
Okay.
This is how we handle it normally.
Thank you.
Any further questions, discussion? All right, let the record show ordinance 2022-28 MHG annexation as introduced. Next item on the agenda, legal counsel report.
Just report to the council that we had training with the department heads today, and it's always good to meet with your department heads. And so we've checked that box for another year. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Next item on the agenda is the second of two public comment opportunities. You may comment on items on the agenda that are not a public hearing or on a specific matter within the council's jurisdiction. This is not a Q&A session, but an opportunity to share your comments with the council. Please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and limit your time to 3 minutes. Seeing no one come forward, we'll close that section of public comment. Second opportunity for council comment.
I'll comment. So I didn't know that Steve wasn't going to say anything about DPW. I thought he was going to go through all the things going on. Kudos to Steve, and as well as to the inspector out there on 100 South. I think it's safe to say it should be tonight they're going to open that up. It is now open. Okay, good. Well,
Hey, great.
been stuck in meetings, so I didn't know that, but that's great. I just want to say they were out Sunday putting down hot mix asphalt all across there, and they were working very well with it. I know this has been a tough project, and it's slow and takes time, but I appreciate any inkling that we get of getting that thing closer to being open. So I just want to say thank you.
I have a question. As we're doing the budget here, I remember along the way, someone said that our assessed value increased 14% from last year to this year.
16%.
Okay. My question is, and I'm assuming that's because of all the great things that we're doing here. Does the township, when they do their budget, or when the school does their budget, do they benefit from that assessed value as well?
Yes, they do.
So my question then is, and I'm not sure anybody has the answer, as we continue to talk about unification, reorganization, whatever word you want to use, and if we increase 15%, that benefits then, as we do our research and our homework to support why we believe this is so important. I can't believe either one of those entities would be impacted with a deficit from any revenue that they're getting. I mean, if we went up 15%, they went up 15%. And if you look at the school's budget, their budget's gone up, what, $6 million from the year before, thanks to the town of Avon. So I guess that's my point to the public is, everybody's riding our coattails and they're riding other things about us too. But all the good things that we're doing, they're all benefiting from it. So I don't know why there is such this pushback or negativity about considering or certainly entertaining the thought about reorganization. That's all I have.
I just want to correct one number. School's budget went up almost $28 million for next year, not
That's even
6.
worse.
28 million, nearly 28 million. Yes. Any further council comment
And our total budget is what?
for next year's 24?
20,
It's more than that.
I don't remember the number off the top of my head. Yeah, I think about 26 million is the entire town budget.
so they could actually have another town, if you think about it that way, from our budget.
Just about.
Exciting thoughts, that's all.
I failed to mention in my earlier public comments or council comment that I did attend the RDC meeting on Monday or Tuesday. I've lost track of my days. Anyway, it was very interesting to attend it. I was the only one there in attendance. So,
Next item on the agenda, council calendar.
I don't have a ton for you guys, just reminder, your next meeting is October 6th. So this is the next 3 months. We move to the first and third Thursdays. So October, November, December, we meet the first and third Thursdays. So October 6th is the next meeting. We do have a work session beforehand. And then I think somebody already shared it too. I did want to make sure Don Hodson asked that I pass on to all of you that the public hearing for the reorganization is on October 25th. So just, I know that was shared already during council comment too, but if you guys want to make sure you get that on your agendas as well, or calendars, sorry.
I do not have a calendar invite for October through December's council meetings.
Okay.
I will take care of that for you tomorrow.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
So you're going to do the first and the third.
And it was noticed like that back in January, so we have already noticed the public.
Nothing further. Meeting adjourned.